Hello everyone, it's James from the Colourworks. This episode was recorded before the outbreak, and although we understand the current situation has brought with it a unique set of challenges, we still thought there's some really useful stuff around motivation and motivating your team. It's well worth a listen. Later on in the month, it's our aim to bring you an episode which will focus more specifically on the challenges we currently face, along with some tools and techniques to build better personal resilience throughout these challenging times.
Hi, you're listening to the Colourworks podcast, a monthly podcast for business owners and managers looking to improve the way that their people work together. We are specialists in people development, with particular applications in team working, leadership, customer service, and organisational culture. We've been going since 2003 and have so far had the pleasure of working with over 100,000 people across the private, public and not-for-profit sectors. Our mission is to create vibrant workplaces in which all people feel valued and get heard, where communication is honest and clear, decision-making timely and robust, and authentic leadership filters throughout the organisation.
Welcome, and thank you for tuning into the Colourworks podcast. My name is James Hampton, and I'll be hosting today's show. My role here at the Colourworks is to support our team and design and deliver bespoke programs based on our clients' team, leadership, and culture needs. In this episode, we are going to be exploring motivation and recognition. And to do so, we are joined by motivation specialist Susannah Brade-Waring from Aspirin Business Solutions. Welcome, Susannah. Tell us a little bit about Aspirin Business Solutions.
So I've been running Aspirin Business for over 10 years now. And I set it up, back in 2008, and then moved down to Dorset in 2010, and I've been running it full time since then. Prior to that, I was a finance director of an environmental technology business in North Nottinghamshire,
right,
and I had helped to grow that from a startup to over £10 million of turnover, and then we took it through a successful management buyout.
Fantastic. And what gave you the motivation to jump into Aspirin Business Solutions? It seems like a big jump.
It was a big jump, and I had the opportunity to stay on and to be a shareholder, but in truth, my passion wasn't in the technology that we were developing, it was in growing the business. And I didn't know that was my passion until I had the opportunity to join Monsell. It's what I call a non-family business because my dad was the MD, but we never use the word dad at work or home. And that was very good training for me, actually, in learning in that kind of self-discipline and management. But it gave me the opportunity to actually learn about business and to grow businesses. And I that's what I loved. And so once we got to the point where we could sell it, there was nothing else to really grow and develop. It would just be tweaking. And I'm not a tweaking kind of person.
All right. So at what point did the people side become incredibly important to you from finance director looking at the facts and the figures and the solution and process and problems? At what point did the people piece become really important to you?
I think it's a great question. I think the truth is that I've always cared about people. It's just that I am not maybe necessarily... it doesn't come natural to me. I'm not one of these people who can look at somebody and see what's going on and see how they're feeling. And I think that's why it was easier for me to go to the spreadsheets, to look at the finances, to look at the data, because the data doesn't mind if you analyse it, alter it, change it. It doesn't have moods. It doesn't get upset. It's just data.
Yeah.
So that was quite an easy way for me to kind of almost learn to make a difference, learn to be successful. But then I really realised that in order to grow and develop, and what gave me true happiness was actually developing people. And they're much trickier. So I had to become an expert.
Well, you're stepping between the known and the unknown, really there, the logical and the psychological.
Absolutely.
So with your experience in evidence and process-driven mind, how do you apply that towards the people development side of things and let's say analysing them as you mentioned?
And I think that's a good word for it is I would love to say that my approach kind of comes from led by the heart. It is led by the heart, but it has to kind of go through my brain to actually for me to understand it. And I've had to learn about emotional intelligence. I have learned kind of what works, what doesn't work, how to manage myself first. I always take that responsibility for managing my behaviour, my attitude, my mindset first. And I looked at so many different kind of tools and ways to try and help me to understand trends and patterns, to help me predict how people are going to react and behave, and help me to understand how they were feeling. And I guess maybe an obvious question is, why didn't I ask? And sometimes I ask. Sometimes as a manager, you don't ask because you don't know what you're going to do with the answer. So again, maybe it's easier not to ask certain questions. And then eventually, when shortly after I moved down to Dorset, I met James Sale, who's the creator of Motivational Maps.
Yeah.
Motivational Maps is a diagnostic about motivation, but it is data-driven. It has the numbers as well as the language. And for that was the natural bridge for me in being able to piece the two things together.
That's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, taking this data approach with Motivational Maps and a team or individuals and bringing that combination together. So when you're with a client, how have you found the motivation to do the softer skills, the emotional intelligence stuff, coupled with the data in that delivery?
For me, it's natural. My number one motivator is making a difference. And you can't really make a difference. You can make a difference in business, but actually it's the people that count. For me, it's always the people that count. And so I think the motivation has always been there. I just didn't have the skills to know how to achieve what I wanted to be able to achieve.
Great. So when you're working with a team or an individual in a coaching setting, presumably that's the delivery methods that you do. How do you position motivation in the working environment?
It's really interesting because so a lot of the delivery that I do is at board level. It's with leaders. It's in a small amount for me of one-to-one coaching and a lot of group work. Motivation sits at the heart of every single thing that we do, from that very first interaction that we have all the way through. It embeds it, because what I've learned is it doesn't matter how good the stuff is that you're trying to actually educate people about, communicate, if they're not motivated. So it has to start with what's important to them, what's engaging to them. Do they find it relevant? Do they find it useful? Do they find it interesting? So motivation at that level for me is embedded into every single thing that we do and every single interaction. They have to feel important because they are important.
Agreed. So how do we build it, motivation? How do we get hold of it? And actually, if it sits at the core of everything we do, how do we build it?
It starts with curiosity. If you've done any kind of coaching, you will know that, or even if you tried to help someone who didn't want to be helped, so trying to help someone to stop smoking who doesn't really want to give up smoking, the desire has to come from them. So once they start to get curious about, actually, why is this happening to me? Why does that happen? I want to achieve this, but I'm struggling with it. Then it opens up the conversation, and then you can start to get into discussions around motivation. It's much easier with having the motivational map because it depersonalizes everything. It gives us something to, what I say is, when it sit opposite each other, we sit side by side, and together we look at the motivational map and we discuss it. And we say, okay, this is the results that have come out. Is this true for you? How does that work for you?
So it's using diagnostics to help explore individuals, not just personal style, but preferences around motivation and drivers is invaluable. Bringing that data approach in. Obviously, we use the insights discovery model, which looks at innate behavior there. And I do see the two sitting alongside one another in quite a unique way in how they might help or support individuals. When you're bringing motivation to life with a team, what does it look like when you're motivating a team?
So if you're, so I think in terms of personality, I think you're spot on. One of the things in terms of motivation, I can't always tell how someone is going to present in terms of their behaviour, and the personality profiles certainly help me with that. And then the motivation is more about understanding why, maybe why do they behave that way? What's driving that behaviour? When you're starting to motivate a team, you do it at different levels. I'm not a rah-rah kind of person who kind of goes in there and just tries to motivate them for an hour or a day. I want strategies that last, and I want to make a difference that lasts for the individual. So whilst you can do that at a team level, in truth, you have to do it at a culture level. You have to do it with the leaders, because I've had enough experience of going in, trying to make a difference with individuals, only for the leaders to inadvertently, unconsciously, consciously disrupt it. So what's the point? So actually, you kind of have to work across the organisation at different levels, potentially at the same time, because you have to create that momentum where it all then carries forward.
Great, excellent. And within organisations, what's your ideal way of working when it comes to motivation?
It depends on, so you've got to start with headaches, and the Aspirin Business was always for me around going, I had a whole load of headaches as a finance director, partly because I wanted to figure things out myself. Of course, that, was great in terms of giving me the opportunity to try things out, but it also meant that I had a lot of problems to sort out by myself. So that's what I bring to organisations. Again, you've got to start with a headache, you've got to start with motivation. Where do they see the need? That's the kind of the entry point, the door in, to start looking at something. Quite often leaders, when you talk to them, will say, yeah, that's exactly what my team need. They don't necessarily see that's what they need themselves. And that's why for leaders, trying to help them work on their behaviours has to come from a higher purpose, something bigger than themselves that they're drawn towards to go, oh, and we'll also do this because it's important.
Would you, you seem like an incredibly motivated person simply from where you've been, from finance director, knowing what lights your fire and your passion and translating that into a new business idea. Would you class yourself as motivated?
Yes. And I think everyone around me says, I'm very driven. I have learned to kind of manage myself very well. I think, everyone has up days, down days, days when you've got very little energy. But I know myself well enough, and I've worked on myself well enough to kind of know when to be kind to myself and to have a rest, and when to kind of pick myself up and kind of go, right, come on, actually, yes, there are some things that aren't so great, but actually the majority of things are fantastic. I'm so lucky to be where I am, who I am, to have my health, all sorts of things. Gratitude is massively important. And I'm always full of ideas and how I can make things better.
Brilliant. What's your biggest success story in building motivation with a team or leader?
Gosh, I think one of the ones that's is a success. I don't know. One of the things that really sticks in my mind from when I first started Motivational Maps, I'm always very cautious about bringing a new tool in to kind of test it myself first.
Because you use quite a few tools, don't you, to deliver what you do?
I've tried lots of different tools, and you have to find tools that resonate with you. When it's a tool that you believe in, you're passionate about, then that's a tool that you're going to learn more about, and therefore you can deliver more excellence with that tool. So with the maps, only within a few months, I had a guy who did the motivational map for him. Actually, it's two guys who were kind of on the shop floor, as it were. And one of the guys, when I did the second session, said, yeah, everything's great. I'm getting a divorce. I was like, yeah, okay. Because of my motivational map. I'm like, okay, tell me more. And he said, actually, it's fine. He said, when I looked at the motivational map, then I looked at what motivated me and what was important to me, I realised that is who I am. That's who I want to be. My wife doesn't want that. And actually, I'm not prepared to change. And I think it didn't cause the divorce. It helped him to consolidate in his own mind what was important to him. You fast forward that, 7-8 years, he's now very happily married. He's a shareholder in that business. There's something about people just really understanding who they are and being able to actually start to like and trust themselves. And far from being something very selfish, actually allows them to give more because they are more.
I think there's a few things in there that really resonate that you've brought to the surface. And kind of what we do as individuals is create fulfillment and happiness in individuals by people understanding the whys behind things. And that might lead to a change in career, a change of marriage, as you've said. But it's certainly about helping them understand more about themselves and how they might be motivated. Mm-hmm. And I think from my perspective, that motivation starts internally. There has to be that instigation and then the implementation and then that sustainability. Because from my perspective, motivation is about is about having an idea and making it real, but then keeping the practice going. So it's a muscle and it grows and it gathers strength over time.
So how's that worked for you in terms of taking you from where you were to where you are now and doing what you do?
Oh, well, it's an interesting question because I think at the core is desire to be something. And that's kind of the instigation of it, which is that chemical reaction that sits underneath that gives us the actual strength to implement something. And that implementation needs to be something that you're fascinated by. And if there's something that truly fascinates you, from my own perspective, then we will be inquisitive and look into it and understand more about it. And since I started doing this 12 years ago, and prior to that being in therapy and having a private change practice, it's always been about helping people. It's always about developing other people. And moving into a corporate setting, the motivation for me, the implementation and the practice just got stronger and stronger and stronger. And as much as I can, I try and apply that in other areas of my life. When training for triathlons, although I've fallen off the wagon, so I might have to have a little bit of help from you to get back on the wagon there. Because this is the interesting piece for me, having the motivation to achieve something in the past, stopping it, so that sustainability has fallen by. How do we relight that spark of motivation in order to do something?
It depends on what it is. I think for me, the work context is we know that we have to, work is so many things to people. And this is why work is actually not kind of straightforward. Yes, of course, it's about money. Everyone needs a certain amount of money to be able to live. And the amount of money that people want and need depends, it's a very personal thing.
Lifestyle.
Yeah, it's absolutely, it's a very personal thing. Beyond that, it's around the social, the friend, the purpose, the getting up and doing something, contributing to the world. So I think in work, in some ways, it's easier to stay motivated because there is an environment, there are external expectations on us, and we have colleagues, and we're kind of running at a pace. And whilst we might lag behind sometimes, we're going to catch up because actually we're part of some kind of group, whether that's internal with our colleagues, whether that's external with our customers, or like you say, actually some kind of sense of who we are and who we aspire to be. Outside of work, if it's a triathlon, it's that kind of, why are you doing it? And you have to kind of find that internal motivation. It might well be for a better lifestyle, health, and quite often we're motivated for other people. So we're quite often motivated to do things for others, like our family, that we wouldn't necessarily do if we didn't care for them, love them, all of those other kind of things. Definitely, my youngest is now a personal trainer, and I've kind of I've got spirit as one of my motivators. I don't like being bossed around. I kind of like the freedom and autonomy. I've avoided having personal trainers, but given that I trust him, I can tell him when to stop and not push me too hard. I've had some personal training sessions and they've been brilliant, and I have definitely been pushed more than I would have pushed myself. Yeah. So for something like that, it's sometimes finding the mechanisms, whether that's a person who's going to kind of keep pushing you, whether that is some rewards. You got to almost know yourself and find and be curious to kind of go, actually, what is it that keeps me going and keeps me getting up in the morning, putting those running shoes on, whatever it is.
So this is where we're delving into the world of values, whether they be intrinsic or extrinsic, and understanding what motivates us based on our values as a springboard.
It's really close. They're not, motivators and values are not exactly the same thing. However, they overlap, absolutely. And of course, what's important to us changes at different stages of our life. So, this kind of a sense of identity.
Yep.
So certainly when you look at, from the beginning as a child going into school, and that identity of actually wanting and needing to belong, to fit in. Acceptance, and because if you stand out, that can be dangerous. To then going into the workplace and actually wanting to achieve, so then, wanting to have Well, is it ego? Because actually, I really think a sense of mastery, which we've lost over the years, when you go back to kind of the traditional apprentices, that gave you a sense of identity, a sense of worth. And I think it gave you a real sense of mental well-being and strength.
Isn't that the creation of a robust ego so that it will drive us or motivate us through to the next stage?
Ego is kind of used in different ways, isn't it? Yeah. And I think there's a sense of self. Ego generally is kind of used in terms of negative terms, but we all have to have a sense of self. I think it's incredibly healthy to like yourself, to trust yourself, because when you do that, you can like other people far more. You're not having to pull them down to pull yourself up.
Yeah.
And I think it's really hard to trust others if you don't trust yourself.
Self-trust is really important.
Really important.
And that comes from... Well, sometimes some people are naturally born more self-trusting, I guess. Is that connected to confidence?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And where that comes from, it's difficult to know, isn't it? Are you born with it? Yes. Then, of course, life knocks it out of you. And I think it depends.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it really depends on...
And then it's about rebuild.
Yeah. And those values come from your family. So it's kind of what you were taught success was about and life was about. So it's everyone, I think what I have learned over the years, everyone has a story, and everybody, no matter how successful they look, everyone has got stuff going on.
Yeah.
And to be kind.
Yeah, absolutely. So to roll that right the way back, just at the core of us in our psyches, we've got our values as let's say the foundations of who we are and why we do things, which will springboard to the motivations. Laying up, then we've got our beliefs, which beliefs are the translation of the values and our interpretation of that based on our understanding and perceptions of the world. And then the springboard to that is then motivation, which is closely linked to confidence.
I think, well, if you looked at an onion and you look from the what we see is the outside, we kind of see the skin of the onion and we see some of the outcomes. So some of the results that you might create in your personal life, results that you create in the workplace. Behind that sits the behaviours. So we can see outcomes, we can see behaviours. What we can't see is what sits behind that, which is more the attitude, the mindset, the beliefs, the values, the motivators.
The physiology, the biology,
all of those kind of
biochemistry.
things all kind of fit into that. And so one of the things that we do kind of as managers is try and tackle the outcomes and the behaviours. Yeah. It's very difficult, and it's you've got to be really careful about kind of looking and working with those inner layers. But then that's where the work that we do comes in, because that's what we've trained at to create those lasting and deeper changes that people want to make. It's their life, their body. It's not for us to change it unless they want to change it.
Agreed. And that's the motivation where it really comes down to at its core, isn't it? And it's also a very good point that you highlight that in organisations we focus heavily on the behaviours, because they're the visible things. It's the things that we can see, the things that we could almost map progress on. And when I work with organisations, I state that behaviour is the end result of all of these other things that we have discussed. And the reason that we behave in a particular way is because of at our core, we are just data. Susannah.
And feelings.
Evidence and data. Well, interestingly, that chemical construct and that data will then create an emotion.
Yes.
And that emotion will then be associated to a feeling. And then that feeling will be the conscious assumption of what we think it is. So the process of us arriving in that state, that behaviour, is all this other stuff that lies beneath.
That you can't see.
That you can't see.
Yes.
And motivation just being one part of it, but all these other things being intrinsically linked to that motivation.
And that's why it gets really, really complicated. Yeah. And life is complicated enough. Yeah. And if you look at, books like Cialdini, and he talked about when life is very kind of complicated, then humans look for shortcuts. So you kind of look at all that kind of stuff and you go, that's too much to deal with. Actually, I'm just going to try and deal with the behaviour. Or maybe I just won't bother having the conversation today because I've got 15 other things on my to-do list.
That's right.
And that is the reality. And I've been there, so I get that. And even within your own teams that you and I manage, there's a time and a place to kind of have those conversations as well. One of the things you were talking about was recognition, and that is something that absolutely employers can do. One of the things we absolutely know is you cannot motivate somebody. You can create the conditions that allow somebody else to be motivated, but actually if they don't want to be motivated, you're not going to change that. Sure, yeah. So there's for me, there's dual ownership. There's about the responsibility that the manager of the organisation takes, but there's also the responsibility the individual has for understanding and motivating themselves and managing themselves. And when they know what motivates them, and what works for them, what doesn't. It's also for them to have that conversation and to look for that and create that for themselves. And part of that is asking and looking for the recognition they need and giving it some of that recognition to themselves.
And people understanding what it means to each and every individual in a team, because what we're talking about here are things that people are not aware of at all.
Yes.
And allowing people to explore it and to discuss it in a safe environment, whether it be through a diagnostic or whether it be through a facilitated conversation, is almost the most value-adding thing that, from a facilitator's point of view, I can bring to the table.
Yes.
A framework.
Absolutely.
A framework for the team to explore and to fill so that they can have the conversations about what it really means to them individually. The science and the tech that goes behind it, that's something that we can underpin later on. And I think it's really important for us to understand where it all comes from. Some people aren't interested and some people are fascinated.
Yep.
As we get booed off stage.
It's true though. But then that's the same for everybody, isn't it? That everyone's got their passion. It's about where we meet in the middle.
Yeah.
And as you say, I think for me, what we know is vitally important for everybody is everyone needs to feel valued as a person, not just for the role. And that has a huge amount to do with their confidence, with their well-being, with their mental health.
Yeah.
That's not an ego. That's not about, look at me. Actually, it's about their own sanity. And it's about what who they are in the world. And so this whole thing about recognition is really important for that as well. And yeah, absolutely. How do you kind of have those conversations? Well, I think the most important thing is that you have to make time for them. It's really important. As much as we want to excel at customer experience and everything else, it starts with a team. We can't grow, we can't scale, we can't do anything without a team. So we have to invest in the team. And actually, whilst you can throw money at them, and that's important, helping people to feel valued, understood is also really important.
Yeah.
And that's, particularly today, business is moving really fast. The world is moving really, really fast. In the old days, when you look at a large organisation, the change would start from the top. It would filter down. It would take 2, 3, 4 years sometimes for that change to really filter down. That's way too slow nowadays. The change has to happen at every single level.
It's radical, the speed of change.
Yes, it is. It's unprecedented. And it's also at a very personal level as well as an organisational level, political, technology, everything.
It is radical in the speed of change these days in organisations. And I find the biggest trouble with the speed of change is that the human mind can't keep up with it. And we get left behind, whether we refer to the change curve or whatever it might be. So how can we link that motivation into the speed of change?
So what we know through the motivational maps, that's my kind of natural reference point, is there are 9 motivators. Everybody tends to have a 3 which are more important than others. And the 9 motivators are grouped into 3 clusters, blue, a red and a green. The blue is just more naturally motivated towards growth, towards, what's going to happen next? What can I make happen? How can I improve that? How can I change that? Leaders tend to have more blue growth motivators. The red is more around what can I achieve today? What can I use my expertise in? What's the progress? What can we make happen? That's managers tend to have more of that kind of red present today motivation. And then the green motivation is around almost, it's relationships. It's around safety, certainty, belonging, and that has all happened in the past because it's about going to be successful today and tomorrow. I'm going to look at what did I do yesterday that made it successful. I'm going to repeat that behaviour. So in terms of that change in motivation, we need all of that. So we need the people who are leading the change, and we need the people who are current today, making things happen operationally. And we need the people who actually are holding on to the traditions and the values at that kind of team level, and also sort of not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And so it's about just understanding everybody's role within change, everybody's role within a change program. What I love to do in a change program is, yes, bring in the creators and everyone who's going to think about the ideas, but then go, okay, let's now put a different kind of colour on it and go, let's bring in the defenders who are fantastic at problem solving and going, right, we've got all these ideas, tell us what could go wrong. What are the things we should be looking out for? Then we can filter that out and then we can go again. So everybody has a role in change, and it's just understanding everyone's talents, everyone's contributions, everyone's natural motivation.
And I think that's the core of all these diagnostics and these conversations we have, isn't it? Just let's have the conversation about where we all fit, because if we all pull together, we all fit together.
Yes.
And not see those opposites or those different styles as something that is weird or strange.
Yeah.
And communication can.
And that's for me, is that, it's like a jigsaw. So as you say, if you pull together, you fit together. You've got a jigsaw which is actually strong.
Yeah.
So if we're all the same, it just doesn't work.
But when you're not connected by that puzzle, there's a big gap between where the joining parts are.
Yes.
And that's a conversation that then comes together. Brilliant. Susannah, it's been fascinating talking to you today, but I've got a couple of quick questions for you.
Okay.
A couple of quick questions for you. So what is your greatest business success?
I absolutely loved building Monster Up. For me, that was a big personal and emotional kind of thing, because I helped my dad to retire financially and emotionally, and which daughter kind of doesn't want to do that for someone who's been a great dad. It gave me my passion, and we created something in the world which is making environmental improvements all the time, but also just having the opportunity to build my own business, to try things out. It's a roller coaster, you know that.
Yeah.
But the highs are yours, the lows are yours, and it gives you the opportunity to just keep exploring. So for me, I guess the opportunity to do what I do and to make a difference the way that I can.
Lovely. Next question. Your must-read recommend.
I've been described as passionately curious because I just absorb information. So I don't have a one book. One of the things that I use is an app called Blinkist. It summarizes hundreds and hundreds of books into a sort of a 6-minute read. So you can go on there, have a quick flick through. If you go, actually, I like that topic, then go and buy the book. I also use Audible as well, because I listen a lot while I'm in the car, etc. So I think for me, it's not one book, it's finding a way to access that information that works for you.
All right, I'm certainly going to be downloading that. The first time I heard of it was when you said. So the 8-year-old Susannah, what was your dream job?
Weirdly, I kind of wanted to be, I used to watch, I think it was Quincy, who was a pathologist. And I guess it was just that bit of problem solving and trying to solve something, but also obviously then, finding out what happened. And I guess that was about that curiosity and that problem solving. And I've always kept that.
Right the way through in your business today. So
still keeps me going.
I don't find that weird at all, Susannah. I think your thirst for knowledge and quest for information will certainly guide your path there. So over the next 12 months or so, what can we expect from Aspirin? Any big news?
Yeah, we've been... I'm a big believer in practicing what you preach and authenticity. So I talk about business evolution is the new business as usual. We have to be continually evolving our businesses to keep up with and not just survive, but thrive today. So I've been evolving Aspirin Business over the last 6-7 months. And I mean, when you first come into business, when you're as versatile as I am, you can do a whole load of things. So what do you do? Yeah. So I created bespoke solutions, and I've been doing that for John Lewis, Waitrose, Merlin Entertainments, as well as small local family businesses. You can't keep doing bespoke solutions and scale. So I have taken the best of the best, created standardized programs, which can then be tailored, of course, which then means I can bring first-class associates on board and releases me now to work more strategically as well. I'm now a non-exec director. I've just was invited to become a guest lecturer for Portsmouth University on leadership behaviours. So it allows me to make a bigger difference at a bigger scale as well. And we're kind of moving into Hampshire as well and kind of trying to make a difference over in there with the peer-to-peer boards that we run for business leaders like me, who are looking to grow their business but want to do it as part of a community and want to know, where do I focus? How do I learn from other people so I don't have to have all the headaches myself?
Taking your own aspirin.
Always. Every day.
Well, Susannah, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, and really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah.
If anybody out there would like to learn more about motivation and recognition through the Colourworks lens, you can log on to www.thecolourworks.com, click the Solutions tab and follow it down to motivation and recognition. Once again, Susannah, thank you very much. And I'm sure our conversations will continue.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, James.
We hope you found this episode insightful and interesting. If you want more information on today's topic, then head to thecolourworks.com and look for our Solutions tab on the main menu. If you want to be notified of new podcast releases and other useful people development resources, then please subscribe to our mailing list and follow us on social media at The Colourworks. We're active on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter and LinkedIn, and we look forward to seeing you over there. Do you want to see the impact we can have on your organisation? Then get in touch through our website or email the team on inquiries@thecolourworks.com. Thanks for listening. See you next time.